haven't heard about Anchor, it's the easiest way to create and publish your podcast. It's free. That's right, free to download with built-in tools to help you record and edit your podcast from your cell phone or any smart device. Anchor also distributes your podcast on virtually any platform that streams podcasts like Spotify, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, Apple and Google Podcasts, and many more. You can even monetize your podcast with no minimum listenership. Anchor is your one-stop app for podcasting. Remember, it's free. Go to anchor.fm to create some amazing content.
Powered by Riverside.
Welcome to the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, where we have uncensored conversations, we exchange information, and we provide a ton of information for the listeners. I'm your host, LP, Larry Penton. I'm your Fire Medic CEO. We're going to have a great conversation today talking about trafficking. You know, that's one of the 4 core elements of this podcast that we cover. If you're triggered at any point during this podcast, and I mean any point, please, if you need immediate help, call 911 here in the U.S. If you're in the U.K., that number is 999. And wherever your local emergency response number is in the world, because this podcast is broadcast worldwide, call that number. That will get you police, fire, EMS, or whatever immediate services you need. If you don't have an immediate need, we have a number of sources of information, I should say, that can help you for trafficking. We have that number and website. For domestic violence, same number and website available. For any sexually based offenses, we provide the number and website for RAIN, which is Rape, Abuse, Incest National Network. If you have substance abuse and or alcohol issues, or you're a supporter of someone who has one or more of those issues, we provide the numbers and websites to Al-Anon, Narcotics Anonymous, and Alcoholics Anonymous. And finally, if you're suicidal, know somebody that's suicidal, or see somebody that's suicidal or needs help with suicide issues here in the States, 24/7, 365 or 366, depending on if it's a leap year, call 988. Again, 988. That number will get you also access to behavioral health information too. I want to welcome our very special guest coming from the neutral country of Switzerland, Rasha Hammad. She is the founder and CEO of Youth Underground. They're a nonprofit organization whose primary and sole focus is the prevention of human trafficking. We're going to deep dive into trafficking, not only from her perspective, but from a worldwide perspective. We're going to give some of these myths and these stigmas and taboos and stereotypes that, you know, we always talk about. And we have an ongoing series about stigmas, taboos, and stereotypes related to domestic and childhood traumas and violence. But today, our focus is going to be strictly about human trafficking. Rasha, I want to thank you so much for your time. I know there's this big time difference. I'm here in Charlotte, North Carolina. I'm Eastern Standard Time. How many hours away are you?
6 hours.
6 hours. So
yes. Almost 4.
4 there. Okay. I'm off an hour. See,
it's like, yeah, correct.
Yeah, something like that. Again, thank you for appearing on the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. I want the audience to know a little bit about your CV. Tell us a little bit about who you are and your background before we jump into this heavy topic.
Okay, well, first of all, it's great to be here. Thank you so much for the invite, LP. It's I feel very privileged to be on your podcast.
Thank
a little bit about me. I was born in Egypt, in Alexandria, Egypt, which is very far from Switzerland, and I moved. My parents were at the UN, so we moved a lot. I went to kindergarten in Libya, primary school in Jakarta, Indonesia, and then came here in Switzerland, where I'm based. I've been traveling back and forth, but I'm based here now.
You have a bachelor's degree and a master's degree. Your master's degree is in journalism, focusing on communications, and you also have academic experience with international relations. I want to start back. Let's rewind the clock back.
Sure.
Tell me about your upbringing. How did you get involved in international relations? Because you have a very interesting lineage, I should say. Your parents worked for the UN,
That's
or
right.
worked at the UN, I should say.
No, that's right. I mean, I had a very good, privileged upbringing in the sense that not monetary wise, but in terms of love, I was very well surrounded. My parents were together until my dad passed away 20 years ago, and so I had a very solid home, home environment, and I think that that is a real backbone. I'm not saying it was all roses and rainbows, obviously, but when I see what goes around, at least I had that, and I felt that I felt the love within the family. I mean, it wasn't really only my parents, but my family in general. So that's a huge privilege. And then being moving around and traveling in the way that we did, it wasn't touristic travel per se. My dad in particular always insisted that we learn the basic, hello, thank you, in whatever country we went to, even if it was for vacation, learn about where you're going. And we would do tourism, but we would try and understand what the country was about. And I think that for me, I mean, I have a brother, and I don't know if, well, I guess we took it for granted, and now I realize what an education that was and is to this day.
Yes.
We talk about academic. You talked about my academic education, but without that other part, I don't think it's a holistic education. And I think I was really blessed to have that part as well.
Working at the United Nations, I'm sure that had to be just mind blowing. I just visualize walking into the UN building itself because it's such a huge complex, and seeing all the flags of all the countries lined up, waving in the air. You're in Manhattan, you
Right.
know, and just the sheer mystique of that building, knowing that, hey, I'm going in because I'm representing my country. I have a voice that I want to use to better international relations. For you, having that as something that I'm sure you were very proud of your parents. I can imagine that maybe it was something that, oh, this is just their job. This is what they do. This is their 9 to 5 or 5 to 9 or whatever their hours was. For me, when I think about that, because I always wonder, what is it like for children of parents that are diplomats, or maybe politicians, or maybe representatives. They may be ambassadors and different things like that. Growing up, and as you were achieving your academic credentials, what made you think about and focus on trafficking?
Well, in terms of my parents, I would say that I was proud because they were very serious about their work. I can't say that, it was like the heyday of the UN when we looked up at the UN. It's not like it is today. Things have obviously changed. We live in a very different world, but I was proud of the fact that of the education they provided through the UN. I mean, when we go to gatherings or whatever, it was meeting everyone. Like, there was no hierarchy. And I think that's really important. In terms of human trafficking, I came across human trafficking when I was living here in Switzerland. Actually, I was working for a PR company, and I was asked to organize a press conference to inaugurate the first hotline in Geneva, Switzerland, in French for victims of trafficking. And I was really surprised. I said, Switzerland, trafficking, does that make sense? And it did make sense. And I met the first survivor actually of human trafficking in Geneva. And that was a good 20 years ago, or 15 to 20 years ago. That was ages ago. So that was my first introduction. And later on, my mother was working in an NGO that was focusing on human trafficking, but from the corporate side, and they needed somebody for communications. And she was a board member, but she said, can you come? And I thought that there was conflict of interest, but anyway, she wasn't a paid staff. So she said, we just need you as a consultant for a conference because we don't, communications is often, well, now it's different, but at the time, 10 years ago, it was seen as, okay, you just exchange business cards, and that's communication. So when I took on the role to organize during that specific conference on human trafficking, I was a consultant, and then I was asked to stay on, not by my mother, obviously, but by the person, the NGO itself.
When people think of Switzerland, they think the neutral country. Everybody goes there because it's like, hey, we don't have any beefs here with any other countries and all that stuff. Here's where we can send our money, and it's looked at as the world's safe spot. And I think a lot of times when we're talking about stigmas and taboos and stereotypes, we tend to think of Switzerland as, hey, nothing bad happens here. This is Switzerland. We're the Swiss. Like, we don't bother anybody. Nobody bothers us. And there's no problems here. You say that's not the case. You say that there's all kind of problems and issues, just like any other country. Maybe not as bad as some countries, but it's not like you all are immune to any domestic violence, sexually based offenses, trafficking, crime, anything like that. Can you give us just some of your information about life in Switzerland?
Sure. I think, there's a difference between living in Switzerland and the politics of Switzerland. When you're talking about politics and Switzerland in the political arena, it is a neutral country. But when you live here, you realize that human beings are human beings, and there is no neutral country. Right. And you find that you're talking about domestic violence and crime and so on. It happens here as well. The difference is that it's hushed down. Switzerland is a Protestant Calvinistic society, meaning that we're not as open to the US. In the US, you speak about everything, you question everything. Here, it's not the case. It rubs people the wrong way. So you kind of, it's very hushed down, but all the problems are there. The only thing I would say that's very different to the US, and that's Europe in general, is very different from the US in the sense that you don't walk around with guns. That's the only main difference I can think of. But other than that, we have the same. Domestic violence is rampant here. It's completely out of control, and COVID didn't help and put that to light.
Let's talk about that, because we're going to get into the trafficking. That's the meat and potatoes of our podcast. Mm-hmm. Since we do cover domestic violence, let's talk about that. You say that it's rampant because of COVID. It just exponentially went bananas. Explain that, please.
Well, I'll give you an example that for example, I mean, during the lockdown, people we weren't allowed obviously to go out or walk around except to go to get your groceries or whatever. But people had cell phones, and they would take images. And I remember one very clearly, actually a woman being beaten up in her home, and it was so loud. Somebody had caught it on by the, through their cell phone on camera, and it just went wild. It just circulated, and it was an area not far from where I live. And then I got the figures. I don't know. I know that it's 1 in 5 in France, but but in Switzerland I don't know what the figures are, but they're very high. And I actually met a policeman once, and he said, yes, they are very high. And I said, where does one go? And you were talking about emergency numbers, so I'll give them out. It's an opportunity here. It's 112, it's 112. And then there's another line, which is anonymous. It's 143, which is if you have any issue at all, like if you're suicidal, if you're unwell, whatever the issue is, it's the number to call. So that is the same, I guess, as any other country. It just was brought to light again by the fact that prior to COVID, nobody really talked about it. After that, people did, because you couldn't ignore it. You just couldn't ignore it.
Yeah, and we know here in the States, and I would presume in other countries, because of the worldwide shutdown, that there was a lot of things that increased that were negative. Substance abuse, alcohol, suicides went up. There were a lot of murders that happened during COVID, a lot of divorces that happened. There was just a litany of different negative fallouts from COVID besides the virus itself and the deaths and people getting sick. I was a COVID paramedic, so I know about a lot of these traumas that, happened with COVID. I want to jump into the DV a little bit more when we're talking about these. And when I say 911, I'm talking about the emergency numbers.
Right.
For 911 calls over in Switzerland, how are they handled compared to what you see or hear in the US?
911, the equivalent of 911 are handled by law enforcement. So it would be the police in terms of, if you compare. And they're the ones that get, that are on the scene if something does happen. But depending on the case, they would call also ambulance and the medics. So those on the scene are really law enforcement, police. But then you've got, again, medics, and then you've got the fire as well, department as well that comes depending on the case. But they don't take, like you have in the US the images. Obviously, they're sensationalized. I know that, but people are walked away with handcuffs and all that. They don't do that here. People don't walk away with handcuffs. They are taken by the police for further questioning. So that's the difference. But the police is really, those are the first on the scene.
Let me give you a couple of scenarios, and I'll have you answer the questions from that point. Let's say I am in Switzerland. I'm in an intimate partner relationship. I call the 911 equivalent and say, hey, I'm being beaten by my intimate partner. Please help. Law enforcement shows up, and you say that they have this kind of Q&A thing. I'm sure they separate the parties that are involved. What happens from that point too? I'm injured. Let's say I have some injuries. I may not be, I may have bruises or scratches or what have you. What happens from that point typically?
What happens from that point is that, first of all, the Q&A happens outside the actual home. That's one thing. The person who is abused or who shows traces of violence or having been violated and abused is taken care of by the medics, and that person is asked, actually, do you want to file a complaint, an official complaint against this person, your partner, or not. Because oftentimes, and I don't think it's Switzerland per se, but oftentimes when you are in a domestic violence situation, there's a lot of fear, there's a lot of shame, and the fear of you know of saying, okay, my partner did this, is very obvious. And I mean, I know that here in Switzerland, it's not something that that does happen quite often. I mean, it will happen after perhaps the second or third time, which is or more. It's not the first time, you know. They're like, okay, maybe it was a mistake on my partner's part, but I'm willing to give my partner another chance. And the medics take care. And usually if it's a woman, that speaks to the woman and says, you know, there are shelters for this kind of case. If it's a man, it's a man that usually helps, because they make sure that you're comfortable with the person. But from there on, it's really the person who has been violated, who has been abused, who is called on to make the shots, which is rough in a way, because that person is in a very traumatic situation, and asking that person, you know, to file a complaint is even more traumatic, I find personally, you know. I find that sometimes you just need to make the decision. An outsider needs to make a decision, so there's not all that guilt and shame and blame on the victim. It doesn't happen here. It doesn't. That's my honest answer.
Regarding domestic violence, because I know in the United States, there's a huge stigma and stereotype and taboo that only men or people that identify as males are the abusers or the perpetrators. You say that that's not true, especially where you are, because when we did our pre-interview, you said men and children are not ignored. Will you explain that?
I think that what you say is, first of all, is really is right. That when you talk about domestic violence, the first image that comes to your mind is a male, or somebody who identifies as male, who you know, assaults or is violent towards a female, and that's the general impression one has. Obviously, the numbers are much higher when it's male to female. There's no question about that. But at the same time, we tend to ignore the fact that men can also be abused.
Yes.
And it makes it really hard for them to the shame is even greater, because they're like, oh gosh, I'm being abused by a woman. It's like the stereotypes that the patriarchal societies that we live in, and that's all everywhere. So for a man to come up and say, I have been abused, I have been assaulted, takes a lot. And unfortunately, I don't have the figures, but I have heard from colleagues that the suicide rate for men is higher than it is for women, because men tend to keep this information, or assault, or, you know, abuse or incest or whatever it may be, to themselves, and the shame is so big that they can take their lives. So it's something that's extremely important to talk about. And then boys is the same. I mean, boys are I don't know what, again, the figures are, but boys and girls can both be assaulted, and the rates are high, as in many countries. But I think that men are like the hidden victims of domestic violence and violence in general.
This is the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. We have uncensored conversations, we exchange information, and we provide a ton of resources for the listener. If you're triggered at any point during this podcast and you need help immediately, call 911, or you can call 999 in the UK, or if you are in Switzerland, as our guest is, Rasha Hammad, you can call 143 or 112. We're having a conversation, and today's topic is exploitation and human rights offenses with Rasha Hammad, who is the founder and CEO of Youth Underground. I want to play a video real quick about Youth Underground.
When our youth begin to embrace the knowledge involved in preventing human trafficking, then it tends to cascade from them to their parents' friends, and it just keeps going like a wildfire. Youth Underground has really done an amazing job to make sure that no child is left behind and that every child is valued, respected, and given the tools they need to protect themselves from human traffickers.
It just talks about all the different things that we should be aware of when it comes to trafficking. And we're going to talk about that because there's so many stigmas and taboos and stereotypes. And yes, I'm saying that repeatedly, and I'm saying it intentionally because we got to understand that trafficking typically is viewed in one of two perspectives. Either there are people being put into a shipping container from Eurasia, which is Europe and Asia, and coming across the pond, which is like the Atlantic Ocean, and dropped off in some port of call, like New York or, wherever. Or same scenario, people are being put in some big people mover, truck or van, and coming across the U.S.-Mexico border. Those things happen. However, we know and we educate people, and this is why I'm having you on this podcast, Rasha, that here in the United States, trafficking is huge. And I mean, I'm not even talking about from an international perspective. I'm talking about here in the U.S., U.S. citizens are trafficking U.S. citizens. And we've done a number of different podcasts and had guests on there talking about that. And I've done shows about that, also news reports, because at the end of every podcast, we do a true crime story and we cover a missing person case. So today's missing person case is a young woman named Sharon Christine Anderson. I'll be reading her information that's listed on the Charlie Project, which is one of our favorite sites that details missing person cases. I want to go back to, I got one more question about domestic violence. You talked about the people aren't arrested. However, they have the ability to go to a shelter. What are the shelters like over in Switzerland?
Well, the shelters that I know of are, I don't know shelters for men. That's the honest answer.
Okay.
The shelters are usually for women, and they have like a shelter anywhere. But one thing they do have, and they're increasing, is the having childcare. And I think that's extremely important because we often forget children in this who are really fall through the cracks when it comes to domestic violence. And they have that possibility, or they can go to trusted family. But in terms of shelters, some of them don't even have addresses so that they can't be found, which is interesting. They're taken in an anonymous place, but within the city where I am, and they're taken care of, and they're helped. Obviously, they have they have therapy. They have all sorts of psychological help in addition to the physical. What shows is the physical signs, but they have psychological help as well, which is really important. And they have that for the children as well. So that's really a good thing.
Let's jump into trafficking. There's human trafficking and there's sex trafficking. Will you define those two terms and tell us what your view of the word trafficking means also?
Okay, well, human trafficking is the exploitation of a human being to make money. That's the simplified version. Now, there are many types of trafficking. Sex trafficking is one type of human trafficking, and it's using a person for sex. So you have a third party. The idea of trafficking is that you have a third party. You have two people and you have the person who's actually doing the work. So if you're talking about sex trafficking, is having sex all day to make money for the trafficker. So that's one aspect, one type of trafficking. There are other types of trafficking. There's labor trafficking, which is, in construction sites and restaurants. That's labor, that's forced labor. You're working without a contract, and you're working long hours. You can be working 7 days a week. There's also child soldiers, which we don't talk about much, but children that are used in conflict situations. There's organ harvesting, meaning that you sell somebody's organs to make money. There's domestic servitude. That's a fifth. Domestic servitude, which is having help at home, when you have somebody to help you out at home, a housekeeper, but that housekeeper, the passport is taken away, and that person, again, it's a third party, doesn't get the money, does all the work, but doesn't get the money, doesn't have a working contract, and is working at all hours and doing all sorts of things. So the thing about the misconception that one has is that generally when people talk about human trafficking, their idea is that it's sex. So therefore, it's a women's problem. So that kind of isolates people already. That isolates half the population. You've got men and women, and all genders actually, LGBTQ plus and IA plus, sorry. And it's not the only one, but I remember a journalist telling me 10 years ago from a very well-known media that I won't mention, that says, I said, why don't you talk about other types of trafficking? You're giving the impression, you're giving the wrong information because it's skewed information. And he told me because sex sells, and that hasn't changed. It continues to. So when you talk, sex sells. So people are more interested in the sex trafficking as opposed to all the other types of trafficking. And that's the mistake. So human trafficking is like an umbrella, and sex trafficking is one component of human trafficking.
I thank you for breaking that down, because a lot of times, again, the stigmas, the taboos, and stereotypes, we don't like any misunderstandings and misconceptions. So I always rely on the experts to make those definitive notations on the podcast. I want people to understand that there is a difference. You talked about domestic servitude. You talked about child soldiers. You talked about, men and children aren't being ignored when it comes to domestic violence. You also talked about in our pre-interview that, and this is somewhat personal for me because I am a first responder, retired. So EMS, police, and fire all work together collectively in a lot of ways. One of my big goals, not only in starting this podcast, but the work that I continue to do after retirement, is I want to increase the training for first responders. You talked to me about insufficient training for law enforcement in Switzerland. Will you please let us know what's going on over there and why that is, as far as what you know?
The thing about trafficking is that you need to understand the signs, and you need to know what the basic red flags are. And if people don't understand what these signs are, if there's somebody working on a construction site or perhaps sex trafficking is more apparent because, I wouldn't say they walk the streets because they're out at certain hours and certain areas. But domestic servitude, for example, is something that's very hushed down because it occurs in a home. So if first first responders don't know the signs, they won't know that it's trafficking, and they will listen to the traffickers or the people being abused, the abusers. If they go to a couple, for example, who have somebody working in domestic servitude, and they say, no, she's very well treated, or he's very well treated, that person will be afraid to speak up. So there's insufficient training to recognize the signs, because training needs money. And as long as it's not considered something major or urgent, the funds won't be channeled to this issue. And at the moment, I can safely say that in Switzerland, it's not considered urgent. It's not considered something that's visible, that really needs attention.
Okay.
And it doesn't get the funds required, and people aren't trained. So you can have police or medics come up and they have no clue about the signs, But one thing I have to say about Switzerland, and I really want to emphasize that, is that if you're lucky enough to fall on people who do know the signs of trafficking, and somebody who is a victim of trafficking tells them, I am a victim, I don't have my passport, I don't have a permit to stay here, and so on, they will be taken care of. They will not be deported. And that's something that's pretty amazing about Switzerland, is that they won't be treated like criminals. They'll be taken for a few months, in a shelter. That's where I know men go for human trafficking, not domestic violence, as we had previously spoken about. And they will be given, the therapy they need, and they will be helped in terms of finding a job.
I want to talk about some things that I find very interesting, and I appreciate your IG page, your Youth Underground. And if you want to, I'm telling you guys, I always tell people when we do these podcasts, they're always available. We're streaming on all platforms here, folks, like all the major platforms. You can also watch these interviews on Spotify or our YouTube channel, which is Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. So speaking of the video side, I'm going to share my screen real quick because I got your Youth.Underground IG page on the screen. And we're going to go through some of these, I call them memes, but we're going to go through some of these memes that you have because you touched on something that just blows me away. There's a meme that you have that says predators are the friendly ones who groom their victims with kind words. And you say, or your organization says, predators are not big, scary looking people in dark cloaks. They are the friendly ones that groom their victims with kind words. Will you enlighten us on that?
This is probably among our most important posts, and we say that on over and over and over again in different ways, is that the general idea is that a predator has a look, it's somebody who's from, I'll be really blunt, it's somebody from a man, generally from a minority, who will come up to you and kidnap you and do that kind of thing. And that's not the case. A trafficker, a predator, can look like me. It can be a woman. A predator can look like either you or me, there's no type. But what's important to know is that predators, when they lure their victims or a potential victim, they're very nice because they want something from them, and they can tell if somebody is vulnerable or not. If there's a young person who is vulnerable and who is seeking attention, and they will provide that attention, they will fill that void. So it is in the predator's interest to be kind and nice, and I will give you this, I will give you that, and get that person on board. And that's the stereotype that we absolutely have to debunk. I mean, in generally speaking, traffickers are more often than not in the inner circle of the victim or a survivor. You know, it's of a child. It's somebody that a child knows. Some children go to school having been trafficked, and they go back to their home and are again abused, trafficked, meaning they're used for monetary purposes over and over again. So this is something that's really important. They're not, if somebody is love bombing you on social media, giving you a lot of attention, you know, says, I understand you more than, you know, your friends or your parents or adults do, that's a red flag. Be careful. Don't engage. Because that's a predator.
That's a predator. I'm going to read some of these memes because I think for the audience that's listening and or watching, we got to understand that this is a worldwide problem. So one of the memes that you have posted here is titled "Trafficked at 14, Texas, United States of America." Truck stops aren't the only place you'll find human trafficking victims. They're easy to spot. Sometimes it's as easy as seeing one or two adults with 3 or 4 children. They look very submissive. They look very out of place. Maybe they're not dressed properly. You know, when you talk about this in particular, let's dive into that. What are some of the stigmas and taboos and stereotypes in terms of your top 5 key things to look for in someone who is a victim of trafficking?
Well, the victim can be, first of all, anyone. Well, here we're talking, because we focus on kids, that's a quote from actually a survivor of trafficking, and she was 14. That's her quote, you know. So she's telling us, this is what you need to look out for. If you're with you're a kid and you're with adults, why are you with adults who are not your family? Do they look out of place? You know, do they look you in the eye or they don't? How are they dressed? Sometimes they're dressed well. Sometimes they're completely, you know, left on their own because, you know, many of them are drugged. That's very important. So they have a glazed look.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're talking about somebody, for example, in a school setting, it could be a child with a lot of keys. Why would that child have so many keys? Why would a child be picked up from school by different people? You know, why does that child, why is the child not talking or being very quiet, or there's a change in behavior? These are the things that you need to look out for. The first, for Instagram, the first survivor story we shared is actually from a man from Florida who was trafficked at the age of 5 by his stepfather. He used to go to school. He was drugged. He was on coke and alcohol, and he would go to school, and after school he was trafficked, and he said that he recognized friends of his parents. You know, so look for the expression of the face, look for change in behavior, look for a child who could be isolated. Again, you know, different keys, mobile phones, you know, the burner cell phones that you know that are untraceable. Those why do they have burner phones? That kind of thing. So once you see these signs, you'll realize that, you know, they are quite obvious, but they could also be red flags for domestic violence. It's not only trafficking, it's a child who's being abused.
You talked about some of these signs that we as the public can look for? Because I know that airports and bus terminals and train depots, they are training all staff from the bosses to people that clean the place. They're training them to look for trafficking signs. And so you talked about the expressions, the lack of eye contact, a lot of keys, frequent behavioral changes, uh, cell phones. What are some of the other things that you know of? Because I know uh, there was a thing that was going around on social media that was talking about hand signals. You know, the balled up fist, or you might see somebody
Four
that has
fingers.
a tattoo. I'm sorry,
4 fingers.
4 fingers.
If
I said balled up
somebody
fist. I'm
does,
sorry.
yeah,
Yeah,
that's right.
I was thinking
That's
about something else. Yeah. Just sort of 4 fingers. Some people have talked about seeing people being branded or tattooed with like maybe a barcode or something like that. What are some of the other physical signs that you know of, like a tattoo or something like that, that is an indicator of this person may be victimized?
the thing about tattoos and it, you know, a lot of these signs, they don't show. A tattoo won't show.
Mhm.
And you'll find that if you are talking to somebody who is actually in a trafficking situation, sometimes they don't even know they're being trafficked because they are being taken care of, so to speak. That sounds crazy, but if somebody is comes from a dysfunctional home life and all of a sudden is with somebody who gets them clothes and takes care, quote unquote, of, you know, of them, they feel they owe that person something, that they owe that predator, the trafficker, something, and they won't speak up. They won't speak up because they feel they owe the person something, or they're just too afraid. So the worst thing you can do actually is, if you see somebody in a trafficking, you think is in a trafficking situation, it's like domestic violence. Don't go up to the person ever,
Okay.
because then it's dangerous. You know, they can be the predator can retaliate, or they can disappear. The best thing to
Absolutely.
do is to call somebody immediately, law enforcement, whatever, and keep an eye on the person.
Here's another
That's
meme
not,
that I find very,
sorry.
very interesting. What were you going to say?
I was going to say, as an example, actually, of an example that comes to my mind is that there were two girls, young teenagers, and that happens very often on social media now. You know, with girls that want to show that they're older than they are, or that want to be models, because models is like, wow, that's a, you know, big money and will be famous, rich and famous, and that kind of thing. And there were these two girls that were contacted by a predator, a trafficker, and he told them, I'll get you plane tickets and you'll go from point A to point B, but don't tell your parents. And what he did was that he got them one-way tickets. And this happened in the States. And the person who got the who was checking them in, first of all, said they looked very young, and second of all, had the frame of mind, was in that frame, the intelligence, the emotional intelligence to say, well, where are your tickets back? You're young. You have to have, you know, and
Yeah,
they
this is a
didn't.
one-way ticket. You got to go
Yeah,
back home.
you gotta go back home.
Got to go back home.
And
That's
they
that's
were,
good.
and they, yeah, amazing. And so they were saved.
Saved. Oh my God.
Mm,
Wow. Women can be
yeah,
traffickers too. You got that on your Underground
true.
IG page. Women can be
That's
traffickers
another
too.
misconception.
Tell us about that real quick.
Well, the stereotype is it's only men that are predators, but women are predators as well. And the thing is, look at the Jeffrey Epstein case. You had Ghislaine
Yes.
Maxwell. She was the one recruiting. That's very common because women come across as being very nurturing and soft and that kind of thing. But they can be traffickers as well, or they can be the ones actually recruiting for a trafficker, and they take part of the profit as well.
What do you think about that case overall? Because I've been seeing different comments, saying that, she shouldn't be denigrated like she was because she probably was a victim herself. Then you got other people on the other side to say, hey, you know what? Even if she was, there are people that have been victimized that became advocates, that became, owners and CEOs of companies and never have done anything like that. Even if they didn't work in the field of preventing and educating people about trafficking. All victims or all survivors of traumas don't go ahead and traumatize somebody else. What do you say about the Maxwell case?
I have no sympathy or empathy for her. I think she deserves to be where she is. I think that she was completely complicit. She not only recruited girls, but she actually assaulted girls and raped girls as well. And she did it with Jeffrey Epstein. That's common knowledge. It's not something that I think. The proof has been shared over and again. So I understand that if you are a victim, you can change but I don't think she was a victim or is a victim. I think that she was completely complicit, and they worked together because she had the money initially and the contacts through her dad, through her father, who was a very well-known man. And through her contacts, she was able to introduce Jeffrey Epstein into the circles of princes and professors and presidents and so on and so forth. So they were a team working together. I don't think he would have made it that far without her, and vice versa for her. So they needed each other, and she's no victim as far as I'm concerned.
I look at Epstein and Maxwell this way. He was like the CEO of this trafficking and sexually based offense company. She was the COO. She was the day-to-day person. You know what I mean? She did a lot of the work in the background and different things like that. This Trigger Warning Talk podcast, we cover 4 components: sex trafficking and human trafficking. We talk about domestic violence. We talk about sexually based offenses. And we talk about true crime. And this conversation and this particular episode, we got all 4 in one. Right. So this is why we do the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. We don't have any qualms about talking about the things that are uncomfortable, that may be triggering. So if you're triggered at any point during this podcast and you need help immediately, please call 911, or you can call 999 in the UK, or if you're in a place like Rasha is, which is in Switzerland. I got to come, Mrs. LP and we got to take a trip over there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we got to, I need her to get her passport updated because she needs to.
And I need to come see you.
Yeah, so we're going to be coming to a town near you. Maybe we'll have a pint or somewhere. I don't know, like, what do they call drinks over there? Whatever.
Yeah, sure.
So I say that, I say that because, it's, when I think about that case, it's mind blowing. And again, women can be traffickers too. We're going to be wrapping up in a few more minutes. I want to jump to 2 more topics. I want to talk about the mental health component because you have a great meme, and I got to pull it up real quick, but I'm going to be talking about it while I'm pulling it up. Tell us about the mental health component when it comes to trafficking.
Well, you talked about having uncomfortable conversations, and I think that if you don't talk about human trafficking at a very young age, because kids understand, you don't need to tell them be afraid, but use empowering language. I think it's extremely important because nowadays you've got kids that have experienced, that have been assaulted, that have experienced not necessarily trafficking, but assault, sexual assault, or are in a situation where they have been exploited, and you've got 7, 8, 9-year-olds who are seeing therapists. You've got 12-year-olds who are committing suicide. That's unheard of.
Yes.
I don't know whether it's since COVID that we're talking about that, because you can't ignore it anymore, or if that was the case before. But now you can't ignore it. You cannot ignore it. And if you don't do something about it now, the costs in the human costs
Yes.
and the monetary costs will be so much higher, because you're going to pay for people who might not, your loss of life, you're going to pay for treatment, you're going to pay, it's endless. So if there is an uncomfortable conversation surrounding human trafficking, well, now is the time to have it, and make it comfortable. Make it comfortable. It's our responsibility.
I got on the screen one of the memes that is posted on your IG page, youth.underground. Close to 1 billion, with a B as in boy, people are living with a mental disorder. And according to the World Health Organization. So again, folks, we don't just come up with these stats or these numbers out of our butt. I always bring you validated, peer-reviewed information. I bring you the subject matter experts. And even if they're not degreed and licensed individuals, I bring the correct and proper information that has the sources on it. So according to the World Health Organization, mental health is one of the most neglected areas of public health. Close to 1 billion people with a B are living with the mental disorder. 3 million people die every year from the harmful use of alcohol. One person dies every 40 seconds by suicide. I have a quote that I always tell people when it comes to mental health. I say mental health crisis is the world's oldest continuous pandemic that has been around since the beginning of mankind. And it ain't going nowhere. We talked about COVID, and we know that was a worldwide pandemic. I'm telling you, mental health crisis has been around since the beginning of mankind. You can look in historical documentation, you can look in religious doctrine, anywhere, any place, anyhow. When it comes to trauma, I say anybody can get it and anybody can give it. And I'll repeat that. When it comes to trauma, anybody can get it and anybody can give it. As we wrap up this interview, and I need to have you come back, Rasha, because we didn't get into, but we're gonna talk about it just briefly. I want to talk about the money. And the reason I want to talk about the money, because I say the money is the source. People aren't doing trafficking just because they're having a bad day. They're not doing trafficking because today's Wednesday, March 15th. They're not doing trafficking because the sky is overcast, or here in Charlotte, it's blue, no clouds in the sky. It's a power thing, but more so than anything, it's the money. Tell us about the money from your perspective.
The money, that's 100% right. The money, it's quick money. And the thing is, the difference between drugs and the human being is that you can use drugs once and it's finished, whereas a human being can be exploited over and over and over again, like a drink, basically, right. Like an object. The profits made from trafficking alone. And these are estimates, because to have figures, perfect figures, you need every survivor to come and say, I have been trafficked, which is very difficult to have. So the figures are $150 billion per year, every year. That's the fastest growing criminal trade in the world.
Oh my God. Say that again,
It's
please.
quick money.
Will you repeat that? Because that's mind blowing. I'm sorry.
It's $150 billion every single year in profits. Fastest growing criminal trade in the world.
I'm just speechless, because it just, when you think about that number, that's just mind blowing. I can't even think of anything else. We're going to have another episode later this year where we're talking about the money, all about the money, like everything that you need to know about the money, because I know that your organization, Youth Underground, deals with a lot of issues when it comes to trafficking. And I'm sure that, when you're talking about the money, there's a lot of things that you have to be aware of. I'm sure that there are things that people don't want to talk about, because you got politicians, you got judges, you got law enforcement, you got celebrities, you got people in positions of power, your doctors, anybody, again, can get it, and anybody can give it. So when you're talking about the money, when they do some of these raids and they go in, you're going to find all kind of people that are in there. You'll find those individuals with those titles that I just named, and of course they don't want to be part of that in terms of the media finding out about it. And I'm sure they use their money and their power and influence to minimize or eliminate themselves as best as they can from being, exposed, I should say. I got one final question for you. And before I give you that question, I want to highlight the fact that you've been on CNN a few times. And you've been published in an article in Enigma.
Yeah,
Enigma
that was
magazine.
just it's just a summary about me, but it's not about the organization per se. But I thought it would be interesting for you to know what my background was.
I'm going to post the links to the CNN articles, stories, and the Enigma magazine article about you, as well as your website information. We'll post that like we do all the content for the Trigger Warning Talk podcast. My final question to you personally is, if you could write a letter or an email to your younger self, to little Rasha, what would you say?
I would say, don't disregard that little voice inside your head, because follow your gut. Listen to what your body tells you. Listen to what your mind tells you. Don't disregard that, because your intuition is usually right. And I would say something else. I would say, don't be afraid of speaking up, because when I was young, you have respect for we were raised to have respect for our elders, but some of them didn't really warrant respect. And you can get your message across by you don't have to be belligerent, or aggressive, but you can get your message across. Don't bottle it up inside. So I would say definitely don't be afraid of speaking up, because I was afraid of speaking up when I was very young.
Time for our shameless plug segment. What you got coming down the pike, Rasha? You got any more interviews in these major publications? You're gonna be on CNN? You're doing a TED Talk coming up or anything like what you got going on, girl?
We're working on we are writing a chapter in a book that's going to be published of NGOs that are global NGOs that have influenced are influencing society and for the better, or influencing the world for the better. So I'm extremely pleased about that. And then I'm working on. I'd love to open an office in the US. So that's something that we're working on as well.
Well,
amongst other things, lots of campaigns in the meantime, but those are the two main things.
I'm a little biased, so I'm just going to put this out there. Charlotte is a great city. It's a great metropolis. It's this white collar city. Charlotte Mecklenburg, which is the county, has almost
I've never been there. So
yeah, has an international airport. It's ranked number 16 in cities in the U.S. Where if you want to go to Atlanta, it's like maybe a 45-minute drive. A 45-minute flight. It is like I can drive from my house to Atlanta in less than 4 hours. We're 2.5 hours from the mountains. We're 3 hours from the ocean, and I'm just talking about a drive or whatever. It's great weather. We rarely.
I've got family there. I've got family in North Carolina. I've got family in Ohio and Florida. So there you go.
I'm saying, and you got your brother.
And New York. Sorry.
And I'm here. You know what I mean? So I'm just saying,
exactly.
Maybe pencil it in at the top of the list. That's all I'm saying.
Will do. You don't even need to tell me. That's something. Yeah, I would love that. Honestly, I would.
That would be awesome.
That would be. Everything's possible. Thank you so much.
Rasha Hammad, founder and CEO of Youth Underground. Just such a wealth of information, a great subject matter expert, and even better, I want to show you something that I show people. I got this from my wife some years ago. It's a plaque that says "Not all superheroes wear capes."
Love that.
And it has the EMS Star of Life on that. And she gave this to me when I was actively working as a medic and a firefighter. So that's where the fire medic comes from. So I show you this like I show people that come on this podcast because I say that superheroes aren't the Marvel comics or the DC comic characters that you see. My definition, because a lot of times people call me a hero or a superhero because I've won numerous clinical life-saving awards and been featured in major publications too, and different things like that. I say a superhero is an ordinary person doing some extraordinary stuff in some extraordinary conditions to help humanity. You, my friend, are a superhero in my book. So I'm going to put you on my superhero wall of fame. And I want to give you your flowers. And I want to tell you peace and blessings be upon you, your family, your organization. I am in that. And we would love to have you come back anytime. I got a couple of other things that I have in mind as far as partnering with you in your organization. You are such a blessing to so many people. And all of these topics that we cover here on the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, we love and appreciate your expertise and your commitment to helping us get back to our humanity. That's it. That's all.
No, hang on. That's right back at you, honestly, because I think not only are you a superhero in my books, but you have the courage to talk about things that people are afraid to talk about and are so needed. So people like you, LP, are so needed and so few. So blessings to you and your family.
Thank you so much. We're going to be talking. I'll see you in these clubhouse streets. You know what I'm going to do? Because every Thursday we put out a new episode. I had one in mind, and tomorrow's Thursday, because today's Wednesday, March 15th. So I'm going to bump the person that I was going to put on for tomorrow, and I'm going to publish this interview right here today. This interview is going to come out tomorrow. So March 16th, which is Mrs. LP and I's 4th wedding anniversary.
Oh, Wow.
We're going to
Congrats.
publish. Thank you. We're going to publish this interview. I'll send you the flyer in probably about an hour or so. And, we're just going to have some great content. Again, people, you got to watch this podcast as well as, listen to it. And please write a review, like, subscribe, hit the notification on our YouTube channel, which is Penton Pending Consulting Solutions, LLC. We're streaming on all platforms. So iHeartRadios and the Apple and Google Podcasts and Amazon Music, Audible, Podbean, Podchaser, just so many. There's 12 platforms that we're on, but we are on all the major platforms. So again, Rasha Hammad, CEO and founder of Youth Underground. I will talk to you soon and looking forward to watching this interview with my popcorn and my soda and Mrs. LP by my side tomorrow. Thank you so much. And I'll send you the links as they come in. We're going to switch over to our last segment, which is our true crime case. It's a missing person case, as we always do. And I want people to understand that when we do these missing person cases, these are very important. Now, 99% of the cases that we cover typically are melanated men, women, and children. And the reason I bring it up is this case is about a biracial Native American woman. Her name is Sharon Christine Anderson. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen. And the reason that we do these cases is because we want to bring the same media attention and energy to these cases, because melanated folks typically don't get the media coverage. And when I talk about melanated, I'm talking about anybody that's not Caucasian. So she's BIPOC, which is a biracial person of color. So this is from the Charlie Project. I'm going to post the link of this story in the show notes also. So it's Sharon Christine Anderson. She's been missing since December 2nd of 2000. Missing from Everett, Washington State here in the U.S. Her classification is endangered missing, sex female, race, biracial Native American white, date of birth, October 7, 1950. So she's 72, age 50 years old at the time she was missing. There's a number of pictures that are on the Charlie Project's website for this particular missing person. She weighs 130 pounds. She's 5 foot 8 inches. Last seen wearing a green jacket, blue jeans, and white sneakers or tennis shoes for some people. She was associated with a pickup truck that was been accounted for, and her distinguishing characteristics are biracial, so Caucasian, Native American female, brown hair, brown eyes. Anderson's nickname is Shari, Shari, Sam Howard, Alpha, Robert Igloo. She may use the last name Sibon, Sibon, Sam Igloo, Bravo, Octagon, NATO. Anderson has a tattoo on her left shoulder. She is a Cherokee Indian. The details of her disappearance are she had plans to go Christmas shopping at the Everett Mall in Everett, Washington State on December 2nd. And this is in 2000. At 9 a.m. that day, she kissed her husband goodbye and left their Stanwood, Washington State residence. She said she would return by 4:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That day, when she did not, her family went looking for her. Excuse me. Anderson's pickup truck was discovered by her best friend in the mall parking lot near Mervyn's department store. This was at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the evening of her disappearance. The truck was locked. There were no presents, but Anderson's cellular phone and the gun she carried for protection were inside the vehicle. There has been no activity on her credit cards, bank accounts, or social security number since December 2nd, 2000. Her friends and family checked pawn shops to see if someone had pawned her distinctive custom-made wedding set, but uncovered no clues. The diamond in the ring is flanked in black onyx and set in white gold. Police say there are no signs of foul play in Anderson's case. She was employed as a social worker at the Department of Social and Health Services at the time of her disappearance and is described as a responsible, dependable person who would not voluntarily leave without telling someone. Anderson remains missing and her case is unsolved. If you have any information about Sharon Christine Anderson, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent. Please contact the Everett Police Department at 425-257-8483. Again, any information about the whereabouts, good, bad, ugly, or indifferent about Sharon Christine Anderson, call Everett Police Department at 425-257-8483. There are some other links that you can find when you click on the link to the Charlie Project case for Sharon Christine Anderson. They did a story on KOMO TV. There's a site called Help Find Sherry Anderson. Everett Police Department has a link where they talk about her case. The Washington State Missing Persons Information has a website talking about this case. The Snohomish County Sheriff's Office, which is the county that Everett is in, has information about her case. And the Daily Herald wrote some information about this case. I want to thank everybody for joining us on this week's episode of the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, which is going to be aired tomorrow, Wednesday, March 15th, streaming on all platforms. For Rasha Hammad, I'm your brother, LP. We want to thank everybody for tuning in. Again, like, share, and subscribe these podcasts and these shows because that helps us build the platform. And again, as I always say, live in awareness, never live in fear. Keep your head on the swivel. Use your words. Watch for these different scenarios and situations because it's not a matter of if, but when and where a trafficking, a domestic violence, sexual-based offense, a true crime may happen. Even something along the lines of an active violent incident. You may be an immediate responder who may capture something on your phone. You may be an immediate responder who sees something and says something to a law enforcement official. You may do something as an immediate responder just by picking up the phone and calling for help until someone like myself, a first responder, shows up that can help somebody that's victimized. You may be the difference between that person being alive or dead. And I'll say it again. You may be the person that is the difference between that person or those persons being alive or dead or their quality of life. You know, you can be a huge factor in that. For the Trigger Warning Talk podcast, LP out.